objectives for our webinar this morning. Sara and I are going to start our conversation off with a quick review of the basic elements of a culturally responsive multi-level system of support. We start all of our webinars and trainings with this review to be sure that we're all grounded in common language and understanding of what we really mean by a culturally responsive multi-level system of support. And then we'll move into the main part of our time together this morning, which is to learn from Heather and Julie about their team's journey as they've worked on building their collaborative relationships in their building. And during their discussion, we'll learn how to involve multiple staff perspectives in determining the appropriate types and intensities of supports in their system. And finally, we'll share a few resources from the Wisconsin RtI Center that can help you refine the collaborative structures in your school or district. We want to note that any products mentioned in this webinar are for illustrative purposes only, and not recommendations from the Wisconsin RtI Center. We're not in a position to endorse products, but specific examples may be shared to help you visualize what these processes might look like in your school or district. So we always like to start with sharing our vision and mission of the RtI Center because that is what guides our work across the state. Our vision is that all Wisconsin students will learn and be successful in life. And our mission is to build the capacity of Wisconsin schools to develop and sustain a culturally responsive multi-level system of support to ensure the success for all students. But before we delve into the specific content of our webinar today, we just want to have a conversation about a few acronyms and terms that sometimes can be confusing and unfortunately sometimes also very siloed, but in the best case can be integrated. So those are RTI, PBIS, MLSS or MTSS, depending on how you refer to it, and CRP. So we realize that there are many acronyms in our field of work, but it is very important to take time to parcel out these related terms. So today we'll talk mostly about collaborative practices within a multi-level or multi-tiered system of support. But before we begin, let's just connect all the dots on the screen so we can see where this webinar falls within the bigger system picture. So at the RtI Center and PBIS network, we support schools in putting all those potentially siloed and segregated efforts together. We integrate the core components of these frameworks called RTI in reading and math and positive behavioral interventions and supports with culturally responsive practices prioritized throughout. And it's in an effort to reach the vision that we call a culturally responsive multi-level system of support. We define a culturally responsive multi-level system of support as systematically providing equitable services, practices, and resources to all students based upon their responsiveness to effective instruction and intervention. Here's how a culturally responsive multi-level system of support connects to our state's vision for college and career readiness. There we go. It supports both academic and social-emotional needs of students as they relate to knowledge or how students receive equitable access to academic content, skills, our school and classroom-wide behavioral expectations that promote the application of these skills, and habits, the positive behavioral habits that lead to responsibility, perseverance, adaptability, and leadership. Wisconsin uses this graphic to represent the systems view. The golden ring represents our multi-level system of support, and it's what makes an RtI system, and it's what makes a system an RtI system. We refer to the first level of support as the universal level, or Tier 1. This represents the instruction, collaboration, and assessment practices that we have in place for all students. We call the second level of support selected, or Tier 2. This represents the practices we have in place for some students who need additional support above and beyond the universal level. In our model, this means what we have in place for students who are not meeting the benchmarks we've established and who need additional support to close the gap. This level of support is also what we have in place to extend or challenge the learning of students who have already met our benchmarks. The last level of support is what we call intensive, or Tier 3. This level of support is for those very few students in our system who need more individualized supports above and beyond the universal level. These are the students who keep you up at night, and they're either well above or well below benchmark and require the most expertise in instruction, collaboration, and assessment. You'll notice that throughout each level of support, we have intensifying structures for collaboration, strategic use of data, and high-quality instruction, with culturally responsive practices at the heart of our work. And these are the 8 key system-level components or features of a school fully implementing a responsive framework in any and each content area. We believe that the 8 components must be in place for all content areas within your system in order to be acting as a culturally responsive multi-level system of support. So let's just take a minute and clarify Wisconsin's definition for RTI. The first part of the definition tells what Wisconsin RtI is. That is, it's an organizational framework. So it's a set of guidelines, structures, elements, and principles for schools to use in designing their RTI systems to meet the needs of your students, your school, and your community. It's not a specific set of prescriptive answers for your school. The second part of the definition indicates that this organizational framework is intended to help your school create a multi-level system of support. In other words, create a school system that is equitable and responsive to the needs of the students it serves. The goal is really to create a system that has consistency in what we teach and how it is taught to ensure quality and equity. And the last part of the definition provides the purpose for an RTI system. That is, it's to make sure that all students in a school are given the support they need to achieve academic and behavioral success. So finally, when you think of your system, we want you to really think of one system with a continuum of supports. It should be our intention that within our schools we set up a continuum of supports to match to student needs. So on one side, visualize the highest performing student in your school and the lowest performing student on the other. And a culturally responsive multi-level system of support is about leveraging your school's resources and expertise to ensure that each of those kids and all of the students between grow and succeed. So now Sarah's going to share a few of the key principles for RTI in Wisconsin. So just give us a moment to change presenters.
Thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to quickly walk you through the principles for RTI in Wisconsin. And first, that first principle for RTI in Wisconsin is really that RTI is for all children and all educators. We really want to make it that clear that RTI is for all children and all educators. RTI is not a gen ed or special ed initiative. It's an all-child, all-teacher initiative. The framework is not another way to label kids, but to meet them where they are and move them forward. All means all. In that, we must ensure equitable access to educational opportunities by asking ourselves, do all students in each grade level have access to high-quality instruction aligned to grade level standards? Do all students in each grade level have access to the same resources aligned to their grade level standards? Are all students treated equitably when responding to educational and behavioral needs? All educators asks us to reflect on and implement effective practice by asking, does our instructional style represent the needs of the learners in our classroom? Do we use authentic assessments based on taught material to determine students' level of success? And do we use heterogeneous grouping to reduce segregation, stereotyping, and to improve student self-efficacy and opportunities? The second principle refers to RTI supporting and providing value to effective practices. We want you to honor what is already working in your system and continue to build on that success. This is not about completely starting over. You have some effective practices in place. Identify them and keep them as part of your practice. In looking critically at your effective practices, also recognize what isn't working and be willing to let go of those practices. RTI is impossible without collaboration. It's imperative that our school and district leadership create schedules that provide collaboration time. Collaboration is a non-negotiable in successful RTI implementation. And we're going to be hearing more about those collaborative structures with Julie and Heather in just a minute. RTI is a framework that supports both academic and behavioral success, such as PBIS. When we are making decisions about kids, we need to make sure that we are looking at multiple sources of data and assessment. Principle 6 refers to RTI being something that you do and not necessarily something that you buy. There is no RTI in a box. When we talk about RTI, we're talking about two types of change, technical and adaptive. Technical change is putting in solutions to problems for which we already know the answer. And those adaptive changes are addressing problems for which we don't know the answer. An example of a technical change would be purchasing a resource like a new textbook. An example of an adaptive change would be looking at putting in a coaching model as part of your professional development. The last principle for RTI in Wisconsin refers to RTI emerging from and supporting research and evidence-based practices. First, there is a research base that supports the implementation of an RTI framework to meet the needs of all students. There's also individual practices then within that framework that should be research and evidence-based, like evidence-based interventions. When looking at determining a school-wide process for responding to student needs, you should be able to see through this yellow arrow that it is done, and this is all accomplished through establishing collaborative structures and through collaboration at all of those levels within our culturally responsive multi-level system of support. Collaboration is a systematic process of collecting problem solving about and planning for teaching and learning. As an essential element within Wisconsin's framework, regular and ongoing collaboration is key to establishing, providing, and sustaining a systemic and systematic approach to student learning. Schools and districts seeking to create or strengthen collaborative structures at the selected and intensive levels of support will want to focus on the following. To be effective, regular collaboration around student data and instruction must be built into our staff expectations, schedules, and our calendar. This time should be considered sacred. The frequency and intensity of collaborative teaming increases with the intensity of student need. This includes the degree of expertise in the areas of need that team members will be bringing to the table. Team norms and protocols are valuable tools to systematize and focus collaborative discussions in schools, as well as user-friendly data reports are equally as critical in this process. Schools need to develop collaborative structures at all of those levels of support. Schools and districts seeking to create or strengthen collaborative structures at the selected and intensive levels of support will want to focus attention to the following. Making sure that you're meaningfully involving and engaging families and students throughout this collaborative process, and also making sure that there's representation by multiple stakeholders in collaborative teams, and using them to provide unique and balanced perspectives to fully and accurately analyze data, dig deeper, create hypotheses, and work, most importantly, to develop solutions. To find more about collaborative structures, you can find that on our website, www.wisconsinrticenter.org. And from there, what we're going to do now, we're going to hear from a school example from Canterbury Elementary in Greendale, Wisconsin. So what we're going to do is I am going to change that presenter to Heather Drumm, who is one of the presenters. We're going to turn it over to them, and I am going to unmute them, and we will be on our way. Heather, it's all yours. Heather and Julie, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear both of you.
Okay, I'll start again. Hello, I am Julie Bauer.
And I'm Heather Drumm.
And we are here to present for you our story as a reading specialist and school psychologist who came together to see a similar vision. We think it might have been said best by my 9-year-old. Mom, why do you and Miss Drumm always work together? You help kids read, and she helps kids with their feelings. Well, this presentation hopefully will help to debunk those preconceived notions and show how it's possible to pull together.
We are so thankful to have this opportunity to share our story of collaboration. We started our process 5 years ago and have slowly built an effective, culturally responsive, multi-level system of support that continues to evolve. Collaboration has been the foundation of that system. As educators, we are constantly collaborating with each other, but at times we are not always open to that collaboration. Throughout this webinar, we would like you to think about collaboration in your building or district. How have you been able to promote a climate of collaboration? What types of strategies have you used with people who are not open to collaboration? Please feel free to post some of your thoughts as we move along. As a district, we had been working on building our RTI system and had made several decisions at a district level. We decided on our universal screener, which was Ames Web for reading and math, as well as 30-minute intervention blocks that were to be implemented in kindergarten through 5th grade. These intervention blocks were referred to as WIN, or What I Need. Schools and classroom teachers were told to focus on students that were struggling in either reading or math. Once we began working together as the school psych and reading specialists, we realized we had a common goal of improving our RTI system. We began attending RTI conferences and professional development as a team so that we would hear the same messages and have a common starting place when building our system. During and after the conferences, we had conversations about what we thought and how the information pertained to our system and our roles. After hearing the same message, this allowed us to begin blending beliefs of reading specialists and school psychologists. To us, this looked like a harmony of authentic interventions meshed with purposeful data to help move students forward. This led us to a mutual understanding of the purpose of screening, diagnostic assessment, intervention, 3 tiers, differentiation, etc. We learned that having a common understanding helped improve our collaborative practices, especially when talking with other professionals in the building who then were hearing the same message from us. As the school psych and reading specialists, we knew that blending our beliefs wasn't going to be an easy road, but we had one common goal, and that was to make a culturally responsive, multi-level system of support successful. We also both believed that if we could join forces, it would be a positive role model for all the teachers at our building to be able to voice their differences but come together on one common goal. One thing that became evident to us was that we had to choose data collection procedures that aligned with our focus for intervention. Using the data to inform instruction became one of our first priorities because that was the message we heard over and over again when attending professional conferences together. We knew that using our screener along with benchmarks and classroom assessments had to all share the same relevance in our conversations. Once we built that base, we made it a priority to incorporate collaboration not only between us, but as an integral aspect of how our system was going to work for all staff. We shared these beliefs with staff at staff meetings as a team and even discussed how we came together and how we both worked hard to see each other's point of views. This opened the door for the other members of our building team to add in the classroom teacher perspective as well as special ed. All of this ultimately led us to have a system which included all students through the power of collaboration and blending beliefs.
We chose to have a slow rollout of our beliefs in order to ensure buy-in from teachers. In doing that, we did a pilot year in just 1st grade because we already had the 1st grade team interested, and it coincided with our belief of early intervention. Throughout our learning process and analyzing data collected from our universal instruction, as a reading specialist and school psych, it became more prevalent to us both that early intervention was a way to prevent later reading difficulties. At this point, based on the results of our screening assessments and benchmark data, we had a high percentage of students falling in the Tier 3 range, or below the 10th percentile, which was approximately 11 to 13% of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at each grade level. Our goal was to reduce that percentage by focusing on improving literacy outcomes for younger children. When we started our process 5 years ago, we had to let go of our notions of what our roles entailed and instead work together to achieve our common goal of students achieving individual learning success. This ultimately led us to change our district name, WIN, to SALES. Our former principal, Christian Pleister, attended a workshop which led to the idea of changing our current model of our intervention block. We observed a school in a surrounding district that was using a data-driven approach to forming intervention groups. As a result of this observation, our school team collaborated to create a model that would benefit the students in our building. One of the biggest takeaways was incorporating learning for all students, which translated to not only intervention for children struggling, but also extending learning for children who are meeting or exceeding their grade level expectations. Our collaboration meetings led to some essential outcomes for our model. The biggest outcome was that with the focus being so strong on interventions, we were leaving out the majority of our students, which led to our model of interventions and extensions. We knew that this concept was new and different than what was originally rolled out by the district. So after many conversations between us and the rest of the building team, we felt that a slow rollout with evidence of success would be the best way to ensure teacher buy-in. Again, with our first grade team already committed to the process, it made sense for us to start with them. The process began with the creation of data cards as a way to make sure that the model was data-driven and that groups were formed based on results of district screening and benchmark data. The data eventually also helped with teacher buy-in because it helped document student improvement.
It was because of our continuous collaboration that we were able to refine our process. As the reading specialist and school psychologists, we met to collaborate more frequently than the rest of the team to check in on weekly progress monitoring charts and the overall structure of the intervention extension model. The team then met every 6 weeks to discuss the data that was collected for all groups of learners. Based on that data, students were placed in new groups with a different focus, or they remained in the same group, which was based on the progress or lack of progress that was made. We also designed data cards in the beginning of the process, but discovered as our meetings became more data-driven, we needed to revise the information that we felt was most valuable to the discussions. We chose to add not only the level they were reading at, but what aspect they needed support in, such as literal or inferential comprehension, fluency, etc. Julie and I then brought to the discussion the importance of the rate of improvement using our universal screener, Ames Web. This provided the team with yet another piece of data when looking at interventions or extensions. Again, having a common understanding of the importance of this data, as well as how to interpret it, helped us work as a team to move our staff forward with their own understanding. We knew the data that showed student achievement and growth was going to be the biggest selling point to the rest of the staff. We used the data from our universal screener in first grade to show growth and the movement of students from intensive and selective intervention. In January, we had 21% of our first grade population performing well below grade level or below the 10th percentile. After implementing our model for only 4 months, we saw tremendous growth. By June, only 6% of students remained below the 10th percentile. Quite naturally, at the same time, we saw an increase in the percentage of students falling in the below range, which was between the 10th and 24th percentiles. However, we felt the movement of students between tiers was an important indicator of growth and demonstrated the power of incorporating skill-based, focused interventions with students at the intensive level receiving a triple dose of reading. Now it was time to share with our staff our discoveries and devise a plan to move forward with all grade levels.
As we rolled out the notion of intervention extension block to all staff, we wanted to ensure that there was continuous education to support teachers with planning and structuring. One of the first steps was to set bi-monthly collaboration meetings with myself, the reading specialist. One meeting having a focus on the intervention extension block and the other being focused on universal instruction. These meetings were in addition to continuing the 6-week collaboration team meetings with a focus on using data to inform student groups. The leadership of the collaboration teams was equally distributed between Julie, myself, Heather, and the principal. We wanted all staff to feel that all voices at the table would be equally heard. While we realized that the focus on early intervention or literacy was important because of our data showing a high percentage of students in Tier 3 in the upper grades, we also knew that concentrating on universal instruction was the best way to get the most impact on the majority of our students. So throughout the process of rolling out our sales block, as the reading specialist in school psych, we continued to have discussions on how to support universal instruction. The best way to ensure high levels of instruction with support at this point of our process was to have those bi-monthly collaboration meetings held by myself with classroom teachers and looking over observational data and running records. During this time frame, the district had adopted Lucy Calkins' units of study for reading and the workshop model. This new addition to the universal instruction allowed us to work with teachers to help support their new learning. During the school year as a building team, we asked teachers what parts of the workshop they would like more support around, and then built those concepts into staff meetings, the reading specialist bi-monthly collaboration meetings, and also optional Friday morning meetings. The Friday morning meetings were open to all teachers to lead in an area of the workshop that they had expertise in to share their knowledge and understanding so that teachers were teaching teachers. As we looked at our screener results and saw positive increases in student growth, we utilized the time to collaborate school-wide and shared the growth data with grade levels to celebrate successes. We knew that using our screening tool as our only data source would not be strong enough to continue to have teacher buy-in to the process. Furthermore, we knew that best practice calls for using multiple data sources, and we wanted to be careful not to place too much weight on one measure. We hoped for teachers to appreciate what the information could tell us. We had conversations about the purposes of our data and how to interpret it. We needed our screening data, but also needed information that was more diagnostic in nature. Not only were we using progress monitoring tools such as AIMWeb, but we also used teacher data from our universal instruction, such as rubrics, checklists, and other types of informal measures. Therefore, we wanted to use classroom information that was collected by teachers to enhance our decision-making processes. For instance, we used a student's performance on a reading benchmark to help guide us when figuring out what interventions to put in place or what types of extension activities would benefit the student. We considered what was the highest priority of prerequisite skill or what skill was necessary to refine in order to move the student forward in reading. In addition to figuring out interventions, our system had a strong focus on students that were meeting and exceeding, and we knew that developing appropriate skills and groups and skills was equally important. During the summer, a cohort was offered, and all of our staff was invited to attend to create a learning progression based off of the Common Core state standards to be used for extensions and to support universal instruction. This helped to guide the important conversations about growing our readers who are at grade level and above. Now that we had established collaboration to support both Universal and our system of support, we discussed the importance of our conversations with teachers during our 6-week collaboration meetings and wanted to keep the focus on interventions and extensions. What we learned is, as we discussed students and their needs, we needed to make sure that when multiple skills were identified for either intervention or extension, it opened the door for us to look at the whole child, which led to conversations about what could be done at the universal level. Oftentimes, after leaving a collaboration meeting, teachers had ideas for strategy groups or conferencing. This continuous overall collaboration led us to link our universal with Tier 2 interventions. It is because of these important conversations that we believe we were able to get such positive results by the end of the first full year of implementation.
These pictures are from the data wall used in first grade during the first year of whole school implementation, so a year and a half of implementation for first grade. We took pictures and moved student cards from the beginning, middle, and end of the year. As you can see, when we started our process, we had a fairly large percentage of students falling well below grade level or Tier 3 according to our reading criteria. During the sales time, these students were placed in groups of 6 students or less, and in addition received reading intervention from our reading team, getting a triple dose of reading throughout the day. As the year progressed, that percentage dwindled down to 1 student or 2% of the population. Conversely, our exceeding group, which meant that students were reading a year or more above grade level, was fairly small at the beginning of the year, or in the middle of the year when we started this. As the year progressed, that number rose nearly 40% of students exceeding grade level expectations by the end of the year. Here is a graphical depiction of the data. The blue corresponds with the fall data, the red with the winter, and the green with the spring. As you can see, looking at the far right of the graph, students performing well below grade level substantially dropped from 26% to 6% in the winter and then 2% in the spring. Students who were reading below expectations were considered our Tier 2 population. For us, this meant that during our intervention extension block, they would be placed in a skill-specific group with no more than 6 students, similar to our students reading well below grade level expectations. As you can see, the percentage of students falling at the Tier 2 level dwindled down to 6% of our first grade population in the spring. Students meeting grade level expectations remain somewhat constant, comprising about 50% of the student population, with a slight increase from 46% to 52% over the course of the year. Lastly, our exceeding group rose from 9% in the fall to 32% in the winter, and again 40% in the spring. This was our most startling outcome and later became key when involving multiple staff members. After reviewing the pilot group's full year of implementation, we looked at each individual grade level's growth using Ames-Webb and Fontison-Pinnell benchmark assessment tool. The chart on the left displays the benchmark data for the percentage of students falling below grade level expectations in the beginning of the year and then again at the end of the year. As you can see, each grade level substantially decreased the percent of students reading below benchmark from fall to spring by about 15 to 28%. The chart on the right shows each grade level's rate of improvement from fall to spring in comparison to the Ames-Webb National Norm rate of improvement. The results showed us that 2 grade levels matched Ames-Webb National norms, while 3 exceeded those expectations.
We wanted to remain true to our original plan for teacher buy-in and the emphasis on collaboration. So at the end of the first year of implementation, we surveyed the staff so all voices could be heard. This information allowed us to move forward with our building level team in planning purposes for next year. These points were the overall most challenging points, and then we made our steps to move forward to include time built into Teachers' Day for planning and collaborating across grade levels, which turned into Friday morning meetings. We worked on organizing the interventions used and having a common place to store them as an easy resource for teachers as well. Then we moved into the following year. We made sure to have purposeful conversations at the 6-week collaboration meetings around specific skills and how skills move through a progression of learning. As for surprises, we were pleasantly surprised to see how teachers transformed their thinking from August to June. Teachers discussed that the process, once familiar, became easier in both finding the resources and developing lesson plans. One of the biggest highlights for us was that teachers expressed that they saw student growth and that after reflection of data discovered that some students, whether they were in an intervention or an extension, they may actually need more time in a skill area to be fully successful. The surprises then led us to ask how they felt about the model now that an entire year has been completed. Again, we were so happy to hear that teachers felt that this is an added addition to their day was a success, and that actually they were excited to pursue the same model in math as well. Also, it has helped teachers to think about all students' growth, and by looking at the data to see what students who are within the Tier 2 or Tier 3 range are growing and giving extra time on skills outside of the universal instruction was beneficial.
Looking at the data as a growth continuum helped us to be able to collaborate and make important decisions about how to continue to grow our culturally responsive multi-level system of support. This graph looks into the growth for the past 3 years using Ames-Webb RCVM as the measure and the average national mean for rate of improvement. We noticed that each year grade levels made growth that was either at or above the national average rate of improvement. Furthermore, most grade levels increased their rate of improvement from the previous year after implementing the model for a year or 2. For instance, after the first year when the 4th grade started this process, the rate of improvement was 0.86, which is at the national average of 0.86. After their 2nd year of implementation, their rate of improvement increased to 0.97. Finally, after the 3rd year of implementation, their rate of improvement improved again to 1.08. In addition to the teachers implementing this process for 3 years, the students also had been a part of this process for 3 years. So if we follow a class from year to year, all classes continue to show growth above the national average rate of improvement. For instance, in 2012-2013, the 1st grade class's rate of improvement was 1.14. In 2nd grade, their rate of improvement was 1.17, and then in 3rd grade, their rate of improvement was 1.39. This graph looks at our data from last school year after 3 years of implementation. We were interested in evaluating the effectiveness of our system. Using Ames-Webb national norms, we would expect to see about 25% of students above the 75th percentile. However, in evaluating this graph, we have actually seen 30 to 40% of students performing above the 75th percentile at each grade level. When looking at Tier 1, which is any student scoring above the 25th percentile, each grade level has over 85% of their students within this range, which theoretically is reflective of a healthy RTI system. We know that the ultimate goal is to have 100% of students performing above the 25th percentile, and with our collaborative model to design our culturally responsive multi-level system of support and the continuous growth and support around universal instruction, we are striving to meet that goal of 100% of students performing at or above grade level.
5 years later, we have continued with our process of intervention and extension. It is still in effect, and with every year, we make continuous improvements. We continuously collaborate and adjust the process with the goal always to ensure student success. Using Ames Web has allowed us to compare data from year to year and track student growth for each grade level. A few of the things that we began to notice as we tracked our progress that we found interesting was that the population for above the 75th percentile was beginning to grow each year. In addition to looking at the progress and growth in Tier 1 and the percentage of students above the 25th percentile. We discussed how the need was shifting to more support at the universal level. As a reading specialist, I brought up the idea of adding the coaching aspect to our universal instruction. We then looked at the grade levels that had the highest percentage of students in Tier 1 and began using Jim Wright's coaching model to help support the classroom teacher. For example, last year's 3rd grade students had 90% of their class within the Tier 1 range.
We just wanted to say thank you again for letting us share our story. If you have any further questions or wish to contact us, we would be more than happy to speak with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie and Heather, for sharing your story and sharing the data that you have to support the work that you've done and the outcomes that it has on the students in your district. Thanks again. As we transition over to Liz being the presenter, I'm just going to move over to give Liz the rights again. What I'd like to do is also just let all of the participants know that all of the resources for our session, that both our PowerPoint and the PowerPoint presented by Julie and Heather, can be accessed now via the Materials tab. So you can feel free to download those materials if need be. So we're turning it back over to Liz for the closing.
Okay, there was a question. If anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat box. We have had a few that we've addressed with some pretty brief answers, but one person did ask, Julie and Heather, are students with disabilities also included in your data? Could you just speak to that one question? If you can unmute yourself. Sarah, we might need your help for that one.
Okay, there you go. Can you hear us now?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, we included all students in the data, unless it was a special ed student that was had alternate assessment within their IEP. Other than that, all of our students, our special ed students, were included, and they're included in our model as well.
Great, thank you. And if other questions come up, please feel free to contact us afterwards, and we're happy to share your questions with Heather or Julie, or if you have more general questions about the process, we're happy to help you with that. But we hope that we met our objectives today to review the elements of a culturally responsive multi-level system of support, and we hope that you learned a lot about one team's journey of their collective work and collaboration, and a little bit about some resources for you to continue to refine the collaborative structures in your own schools and districts. We want to remind you, collaboration is a key element in a culturally responsive multi-level system of support, so we encourage you to assess your system-level implementation on an annual basis, because that includes your collaborative structures, and that you can use something called the School-Wide Implementation Review, or SIR. And the SIR is a free self-assessment that you can access from our website, and if you would like more information about that, please feel free to contact Sara or me, or your Regional Technical Assistance Coordinator, who you can find on our website. We are also offering a refresher webinar on March 17th from 1:30 to 2:30 to help your team set up, prepare for, and take the SIR. So if you would like kind of a booster refresher session, that's a great opportunity, and you can find the link to register on the events calendar on our website. So thank you again to Julie and Heather for taking the time out of their busy days to share their story, and for all of you taking the time over hopefully your lunch, hopefully you'll have a chance to still eat, and joining us today to hear about their story and reminding us really that our systems are stronger when we collaborate and pull together. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions or would like more information or technical assistance in refining your culturally responsive multi-level system of support, please feel free to contact us, and take care and have a great rest of your day.